Welcome to Flattening the Curve, a podcast to disability advocates. Here, we knock down barriers one story at a time. I'm your host, John Couchy. Let us begin. Today, real excited to be chatting with somebody who I met a long time ago when I first started here at Disability Advocates. Jeff Light with Inclusive Futures. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So, Jeff, you started up a business that really helps individuals and families with disabilities kind of plan for the future. Can you explain a little bit about the business?
So, Inclusive Futures is a resource for families when it comes to the legal, financial, insurance, and Social Security issues that they are facing both now and in the future.
And those are quite some hefty issues. Most people get very overwhelmed with even one of those areas, and you kind of cover that whole gambit.
I do, and overwhelming is a term I hear a lot. I say it a lot, especially when I'm doing the presentations that I put on, and it's, I would say it's almost unfortunate that it is overwhelming, but it's designed actually to be overwhelming. This is not when we're talking about the legal side of things and the financial and the insurance, as well as then you throw in government benefits, Social Security just kind of being the catch-all for all of those government benefits. There's a lot to it. And I know that, and it's one of the things I talk about, the biggest obstacle that families have when it comes to starting this type of planning is not knowing where to begin. And when they do start looking, how overwhelming it becomes. So, if I do a presentation and it's designed to be a half hour, they never only go a half hour because questions and everything else. But when I do it, I really give that disclaimer. This is overwhelming. This is going to be overwhelming. But the purpose is to let you know between these four very broad areas that this isn't even the answer to all of the questions. It's a starting point. Here's all this information. And I don't do it to pat myself on the back and say, I know the answers to all this. I don't know all of the answers. And this is 10 years in the making, in fact, of I don't know them. And I love it when I do get questions about things that I need to go study and learn about to be able to offer a better service and be able to just do a better job for the people, families, organizations that I'm working with. To come back and say, yes, this is overwhelming, but this is the starting point. This is that 20,000 foot view that we will gradually begin taking down closer to closer into your specific situation.
Because a lot of times people don't even know the questions to ask. They are in, again, going to use the word once again, overwhelming situation of trying to figure out how to best support their family, how to set their family member up for success. And they don't even know where to go, where to begin. Sounds like these presentations at least give them a start of what questions to be asking.
Yes. So I get asked a couple of questions every single time. One of them will probably come up later in our discussion here today, but the other one is what is the next step? Where do we go from here? And as I said, here's the 20,000 foot view of all these things. And it's the next step is we talk about you and your situation. Google, I talk about Google a lot. It is a phenomenal tool when there is an answer to your question. And if, I use this example often. If you want to know who the 10th president of the United States is, Google is going to tell you real quick it was John Tyler. And I didn't know this before. I certainly said, well, I ask this question all the time. I might as well know what the answer to this is. And even in my presentation, we can use this as a cheat sheet. I ask more trivia about John Tyler just to expand on Google and what it can do. But if you were to type in, my child has Down syndrome, my child has autism spectrum disorder, they have this cognitive, whatever it may be, what do I need to do to plan for their future? It is so specific. And I can sit in a room with 5 people or 50 people and point at 2 random people and say what you can do and what you want to do is going to be so different than the person next to you. And Google is, again, there's another catch-all of here's all the answers. And the majority of them are different than your situation. Your situation is dictated by a lot of different factors. And it starts with what your family dynamic is. Are there multiple children? Where do these children live? Where do they plan to live in the future? And a lot of these things we don't even have answers for today, which just compounds the overwhelmingness. Information overload is another term we talk about. There's just so much out there that if we try to do this on our own and navigate this, it's going to be a lot of dead ends and wormholes, rabbit holes, I believe is what we call when we get into those Google holes of just what comes up next. And we keep clicking and we're getting further and further away from what our specific situation is.
Yeah, and it tends to feel like quicksand when all that stuff keeps compounding, and people can then get analysis paralysis and not proceed down the road, furthering on to the next step and actually getting the issues that they have solved. And that creates more issues in the long run when you're not doing these things in a timely manner. And I'm sure there's kind of a timeline that's ideal for individuals to be aware of crucial time periods.
Yeah, so I have in the materials I use, I have what I call the key ages in the planning process. And I mean, it's broken down in nothing specific. So, for example, I have a 0 to 14. And I call that if planning, and we'll come back to if planning and when planning. But the if planning, it's just these are the initial steps that we want to take. I've used this cliche, and I've learned in all of my years of being a financial advisor, and then the last 10 years of focusing on what I call special needs planning. Cliches, and the one cliche that stands out is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is today. And that's clearly skipping 19, 18, all these years in the past. We can't undo time, unfortunately. We can't go back as much as we'd ever like to, but the best time to start these conversations is when it first hits us. And that could be so the key ages, I have 0 to 14. Why 14? Because transition programs typically begin in the schools between 14 and 16.
Yep, pre-ETS programming often starts for individuals at age 14. WIOA programming starts at 14, as well as the transition into high school when
The transition into high school, and they begin talking about the transition after high school as well. And Michigan is unique because it is one of the few. I've heard differing opinions on this. I thought Michigan was the only state that offered special education services to 26. I've been told others. I haven't Googled that myself, but Michigan does go to 26.
Yeah, I know Michigan does, and now I'm going to have to Google it later myself.
Somebody from Washington State told me that Washington did as well. So, but there's not a lot, let's put it that way. The vast majority of states do not go to 26. So, but transition, into and out of high school typically begins at that 14 to 16. 18 is probably the most important overall one age in particular that stands out with special needs planning because everything changes at 18. And we can talk about that. 22 is another age for a couple different reasons. One of them being that is we have Social Security, we have additional Social Security implications that happen at 22. 26 is the last one simply because that's when special education services stop. For the rest of this year, that is the last age of onset for able account eligibility that is finally being pushed up to 46, I believe, in 2026, 45, 46 starting next year, which is tremendous. That'll have a big impact. The biggest group of people that will be impacted by that increase in ages are veterans, military veterans.
And the other big thing that happens at age 26 is a lot of people get kicked off their parents' insurance at that age.
Yeah, so we have that as well. So the transition at that 14 to 16, there's nothing specifically magical that happens. Again, 18 is that big age, 26 is that second big age, because we do see a lot of those big important changes. 26, when we talk about special education services, one of the best questions that I had ever heard about trying to describe that was what happens when the bus stops coming. And that really changes things. So, wherever we are, so I call that the initial phase, the if planning. What do we need to take care of if something were to happen? But down the road, we get into the when planning, which is, what happens when. And the when we're talking about it's really one of the hardest conversations that I have is what's going to happen when mom and dad have passed away. And what is life like at that point?
Who's going to take on those responsibilities if that individual with a disability is not capable of handling those responsibilities? Who steps in? Who's going to take over the planning? Who's going to take over the bill paying? Yeah, I mean, that's a tough conversation, but it's better to have that conversation than the situation happen and there's nobody there to pick up the ball.
Yeah. So I've used this phrase a lot. It was just one of those internet memes that really stood out to me, and it was really just talking about achieving goals. And it said, "Don't worry about how long it's going to take you to achieve your goals. The time is going to pass anyway." And it really stood out. I had a fight with my compliance department about posting that online because they were thinking I was talking about investment goals. I said, no, talking about time. Time passes regardless of our ability to slow it down or stop it at all. But with that, as we were talking about prior, getting into the key ages, the best time to start these conversations is when we start thinking about it. And right now, a lot of these conversations, especially with working in the schools, is that after 18, the post 18, we're in the transition programs, and things have already changed so dramatically. What else is coming up? What changes are still out there? And there's a lot. There's just so much. We'll go back to our word overwhelming. There's so much that, it's so hard to just try to do this on our own because there are so many moving pieces.
Yeah, life doesn't slow down as often as people like to say, like, oh, I'll do it when there's some quiet time. I'll do it when life slows down. It just doesn't. So it's kind of best to just get on the horse now and get that moving versus putting it off.
Yeah. As Ferris Bueller said, life moves pretty fast. And if you don't stop and take a look around, you just might miss it. Putting off this type of planning can have very significant consequences. And that's just how things are going to work, how money moves, other family members, just changes money that is available. That if we're not aware of these things, I would never expect anybody from the government to tap you on the shoulder and say, well, you're eligible for more if you do these things. So there's just so many moving pieces out there, just to be able to slow it down and say, right now, this is the time. We just had this conversation. I just heard about this presentation or inclusive futures, and this is now the time. So we're back. Hey, this is the best time to plant a tree because it's just hit me where I just thought about it. And whether that's at age 5, 15, 25, 35, I work with a number of families that have, their adult children in their 30s. And I wish we would have started this earlier. I said, well, the good news is we're never too late. Okay, just like with anything, if I'm talking about insurance, there's no one right time to buy any type of insurance. There's a wrong time, and that's the day after you need it. Insurance companies will not insure cars that are already totaled or houses that are already on fire. Unfortunately, individuals that have health issues just got bad news from the doctor. It's too late at that point to do a lot of these things. So, whether we're talking about a 35-year-old or a 5-year-old, when these questions start happening, that's the best time to sit down.
So, I mean, the if and when planning sounds absolutely crucial for any future planning. When it comes to the process, you said you do a lot of these presentations. I'm sure this is where people first hear about it, first get their eyes opened, learn what questions to ask. How do you go about working with individuals?
Well, the what's next, the last slide of the presentation, and usually I get this question long before we get to that last slide. What are the steps? The next step is let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's have a conversation about you and what your situation is. And I start every one of these conversations with, tell me what's on your mind. And surprisingly, we go hour and a half, the majority of the time. We're not talking about buying, putting this plan, product, situation in place. It's a conversation. It is the first time that a lot of these families, I feel that they can talk to somebody that can help them, that can answer these questions. As you said, they don't know the question. They don't even know what questions to have. I've kind of phrased it. I'm here to answer the questions you have and the questions you don't even know you have yet, because I know where we're going to go. I know the routes. I know what the fears are. Unfortunately, we've kind of alluded to it already. The when planning, what happens when? And I just finished a book, Forever Child, that was done by three separate moms throughout the country, and three completely different scenarios, and everything about them was different. The only constant, they all had three boys that I would say ranged from early teens to, I know, the mid 20s. And the fear that they talk about a lot in that book is, I can't die. What happens? What is going to happen when we're gone? And it is incredibly scary. And as I said, it's hard for me being on the outside having these conversations when I know that every family that I'm talking to, this is the biggest fear that they have. So when we get to the situation where, somebody can finally talk me through government benefits, SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare, and the hundreds of acronyms that I'm going to try my best not to spit out here in this conversation, but there's so many of them, and it's so daunting. Let's go back to overwhelming,
Yeah,
because
we call it the alphabet soup when many people don't know the difference between SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare. It's just a jargle of letters that people see and do not know how to decipher it. And I'll be honest, sometimes the people who work in those organizations don't know how to describe it either. There's so much misinformation floating around that it is so incredibly easy to get lost. And word of the day, overwhelmed with this process. So I think sitting down with them and just letting them kind of let it out and discover their questions is a great way of starting it off.
Yeah, it works. Like I said, I go into these meetings, these conversations with no agenda. I will usually pick Panera or Big B when I can. Some, for whatever reason, I can drink coffee all day, but Starbucks, half a cup, and I'll be shaking the rest of the day and still not sleep at night. But we have these conversations, and again, it's what's on your mind. And when they routinely are well over an hour, again, there is that sense of relief. I have somebody that I can talk to about this. And it's usually two or three more conversations just like that, from this 20,000-foot view to, here's you and your family, and what can we do to make sure that you're best taken care of today, tomorrow, and all the way into the future.
Yeah, I hear this and I think of passion of mine is coaching, and the definition of coaching is meeting people where they're at. And it sounds like that's what you're really doing, is coaching people through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, and we've gone, I have gone a lot of different directions since I had my first conversation with this in 2015. So this is everything started with a Facebook post from a friend of mine, Jill, who is a special education teacher in Middleville, Michigan, and I talk about this with love and admiration. Middleville, Michigan has to be one of the smallest school districts around, Thornapple Kellogg. And I make reference, I talk about this a lot in the presentations. Thornapple Kellogg actually had 94 kids, boys and girls, on their middle school wrestling team. And I joke to myself, that must be every kid in that school. It is a small school. But she posted on Facebook asking for help, volunteers for her class's therapeutic horseback riding at Camp Manitoulin, and posted the times. And I joke again with love and admiration with Jill. I've known Jill a very, very long time. She swore it'd only be a couple hours. In hindsight, it was an all day event, because not only was it a half hour away, you're walking in the mud and everything else with horses and kids. It's not something you can go change in your car and drive into the office after doing. But what stood out to me was there were 24 kids in these sessions, came in approximately 5 at a time. And at that point, that was 2015. I had been a financial advisor already for 15 years. And I looked at it through those lenses of a financial advisor. And I saw what I consider to be a range of, some of these children would be able to hold some level of employment, and the vast majority probably would not be able to work at all. And looking at it like that, and there were parents there and faculty, I just started asking questions. What type of resources have you found available to help kind of plan for the future of you and your child? And the answer is it's an immediate nothing, no idea, don't know where to begin. And so it's
kind of an ironic spot for the wheels to start turning, is while you're standing in the muck. Right?
Yeah, standing there. And I don't know. I know I'm from a town called Farmington Hills on the east side of the state.
Hey, representative from Livonia.
Livonia, right? Just cross 8 Mile.
Yep.
Don't know anything about horses. I had only fallen off a horse once in my life. That was enough for me to say I probably don't need to get back on one of these things. And it started with sidewalking, which was real easy. But just having those conversations and finding out that there is nothing available. There's not an online, search. We know with Google, it's not something that we can just plug in there. But there was nobody else that was really doing this line of work. And really, it was then, so 10 years ago, really kind of saying, this is something that I want to learn more about. I want to be that resource. I want to be able to help families that don't have anybody that is in the situation where I'm in 10 years later to be able to have these conversations.
Yep. So you threw yourself into the wacky, crazy world of disability and all the alphabet soup of programming. Uh, and you're focused on four main areas. What do you tend to see the most of?
I see the most, there is so call it borderline between the Social Security side and the financial side. So Social Security, and we're talking we're talking initially with SSI, Supplemental Security Income,
Yep.
and what that does. And in Michigan, SSI and Medicaid are linked. Medicaid, I know this is not the exact way to look at it, but SSI, I say, is far more concerned with income, and Medicaid is far more concerned with assets. Again, this is it's not black and white, but that's kind of the starting point. And what happens when we have money that is coming in, whether it is through SSI or some form of employment or grandma and grandpa and graduation funds. And graduation funds was a situation I dealt with earlier this year of applying for these benefits. That being really the first real step. Nothing really happens until 18. We talked about 18 is that key age because we've reached the age of majority. SSI is technically available all through an individual's life, but until 18, it is based on household income. And after 18, it is individual income. What happens when money starts coming in? Where does this money go? And if I have too much money, then Medicaid starts having a problem with this. So applying initially for SSI, we know that there is a very large percentage of initial applications that are declined.
Yep, I think the number that often gets thrown out is over 85% of applicants.
I would have said 75, and I just didn't want to be on the hook for numbers, but it's a lot, okay? The vast majority. And understanding really where you're getting into that are those ABLE accounts. ABLE stands for, it's a congressional act, the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act of 2014, which was designed, and it was designed one way, it went into legislation, came out of legislation a different way. But what the ABLE account is really designed for is to allow individuals who are receiving government benefits to have a place to put money that will not disqualify them.
Now, I do want to talk about that because we talked about the asset limits. And the asset limits for SSI have not changed in...
I believe it's 1989 is when the Medicaid cap was moved to $2,000, and it has not changed since then.
Yep. And $2,000 does not go nearly as far as it did in 1989. It's not that much money. It is a lot of money for the people who are living on the benefits, but it does not give you an opportunity to dig yourself out of a hole when it comes to trying to save up for a car, for your own transportation, trying to save up for a deposit on an apartment. I mean, these asset limits are a huge hindrance, and the My Able account or the Able account, My is the Michigan exclusive, which I'm sure you can emphasize a bit on, but they kind of give that opportunity for people to skirt that asset limit in order to better their lives.
Yeah. And I would even say the word skirt is designed, we're trying to skirt this rule or that. This is what it's designed for.
Yeah.
It is designed to allow individuals who are receiving Medicaid, SSI, to have these assets in their name that will not disqualify them. So, the story I say is you could have $2,500, and if you have it with a Fifth Third, Lake Michigan, Huntington, it's a problem. You have it in the ABLE account, it's fine. The ABLE account, again, as I mentioned before, it went into legislation differently, and I really have conversations about how the most effective way, efficient way to use these accounts. It could just be there. It could sit in a money market. We're not even talking about the investment components within the ABLE accounts, which they are available. We can invest that money. They were designed to a certain extent similar to Roth IRAs, where this money it will grow tax deferred. And if the money is used for what, here's an acronym, QDE, qualified disability expenses, which there is a very long list. I tell people it is a shorter list for me to tell you what you can't use that money for than what you can.
Any highlights on that short list?
That you can't use it for?
Yeah.
Gambling. Anything overly fun. Well, depends if you consider gambling fun or not. But it can be used for transportation, all transportations, medical, education, housing, food, all these different things we can use all this money for. And any growth in that account is not going to be taxed. But I would tell you, I believe that the vast majority of assets inside of an ABLE account are not invested in anything because, again, of the way it was designed and then actually was put into place. This is what is considered to be first party money, meaning it is owned by the individual. Anybody can contribute to an ABLE account, but it is now their asset.
Yeah, so mom, dad, grandma, aunts, uncles, guardians, anybody could contribute.
Anybody can. It's similar to a 529 plan. I remember years ago, 529 plans are college, or excuse me, they're not. As a financial advisor, I was trained that these were college college tuition programs. They're not. They're qualified education expenses. They can be used for any education related expense whatsoever.
Yep. No, I have one of those set up for my daughter.
Perfect. They are great plans. But all right, I got to think of where I was going with this. So the 529. The 529 plan for education, the tax deferred growth, I think.
Okay. So I will add a little bit on to what I said.
Okay.
The 529 plans, this will give you a congruent stream and take over from there. Yeah, set one of those up for my daughter as a way of financially planning for her future.
So yeah, the 529 plans, again, they are for qualified tuition expenses. But anybody, actually, so this is where we were going. I remember my cousin at the time, her son was having a birthday party, and it said on the invitation, he has enough toys. If you are so inclined, here's a link that you can make contributions to their 529 account. Just throw the same $20 that you were going to spend on Legos into this. I step on enough of them as it is.
Wait, you can buy Legos for $20? Those got quite pricey over the years.
You can get a couple pieces, maybe, but yeah, you're not buying the Death Star Lego kit for $20.
Add a couple zeros to the end of that one.
So anybody can contribute into the ABLE account. There are contributions.
Sorry, I was just thinking we might need a separate savings plan for the Death Star.
Yes, I've seen that in the Millennium Falcon, and those are real nice Legoland. But yeah, anybody can contribute to these accounts. There is a contribution limit of $19,000 this year, so that's what we have to adhere to. And if you have aunts and uncles,
that's a yearly cap. Right?
That is a yearly cap. Plus, there is additional if there is earned income by the individual. So if you have an aunt and uncle who are willing to put in $19,000 into the ABLE account, lucky for you.
Hook me up with them. I could use that.
Do they have extra money? But anybody can contribute into these accounts. And again, it is designed for, now I have assets in my name. That $19,000, again, if it was at the local bank, it's a problem when it comes to those government benefits. It's sitting in a ABLE account that is earning hopefully the same percentage that you're getting from the bank, which is pretty negligible to begin with. It is perfectly allowable. And so it allows that flexibility for that type of planning, especially when there is income. So I talk about those scenarios. If the individual is working, it's very difficult. We have to put this money somewhere. I say the government cares about what the value of that account is on the 1st of the month and the 31st or 30th or 28th of the month. They don't really care what the value is on the 15th. But when it comes to the maintaining eligibility, if we exceed that $2,000 cap limit, we're going to have problems.
So, I mean, it is a balancing act of managing the asset limit. And the ABLE account gives an individual that opportunity to save the money and use it for those quality of life expenses. I mentioned before the My Able account, which is a Michigan specific version. Each state kind of has their own variation of the Able account, correct?
That's correct. I believe 45 or so states have their own ABLE account, and they are typically linked to the same 529. They're actually the 529 and the ABLE account. The ABLE Act is part of the 529 tax code, and it does matter for some overall planning, the fact that they are linked. We can put money into a 529 plan and later transfer that money to an ABLE account without paying tax or penalty on that money. So there's some flexibility there. There are potential changes this year with that law. So right now that is the case. We'll see what's going on December 31st because it is likely there will be some changes with that. But the Michigan Able account is just as good, in my opinion, as other states. It comes with the ability to get a debit card that can be used anywhere you need it to be used, checking account as well, and contributions into the Able account do give you a small state of Michigan tax credit as well. So you have that ability. It's just one of the benefits. There's no point. And again, when I talk about how ABLE accounts are used, since the majority of the money is not invested into any specific what they would call a sub account, investment account within the ABLE, it's more or less just a checking account. So we might as well make things as easy for ourselves as possible and not research what Ohio's rate of return is, or Virginia is through American funds, or any of these other states. They're not offering anything that is so glaringly better from my experience. The Michigan Able account is just as good.
Okay. Well, that's great to know. So you have this as one of those tools that you're not going to see advertised on television. You're not going to necessarily find the easiest information Googling, but by sitting down and chatting with you, you've gone through this process before with hundreds of clients that you can make sure that people are getting set up in the easiest way possible.
Yeah. So the initial question here is what do I hear the most on? It is SSI eligibility and that application process. We'll just call it a process. And then what happens when I have this money? And I do get calls. It's amazing, especially in the last year, the number of referrals that I get that are specifically asking about ABLE accounts. What is really unfortunate is, even though, again, we talk about the investment component of this, this is not something, in my experience, many financial advisors know anything about. And the biggest reason for it is not something that they're compensated for. And if I'm not compensated as a financial advisor, it makes it very hard to do this type of work with these things. So, yeah, it is the probably, I would say I get more questions about what do I do with these savings, because I just got declined SSI eligibility. My SSI application was just declined because my son just had a graduation party from high school and we put this money in their checking account. Then we applied and we didn't know. And then, I go back to that, nobody knows what they don't know, as another one of our cliches. And, where does this start? And again, let's have a conversation about all these things. And we're going to start with what's on your mind. Tell me what's on your mind. My mind is this decline letter I just got the second time for SSI because I got this taken care of and now this popped up.
Well, it almost feels like, and I love analogies, that it's navigating a minefield and you have no idea where these mines are of something you think just, yeah, absolutely. Through a graduation party for my child as they graduated, people gifted them money to help them on hopefully a successful transition out. But that comes with risk factors that people don't think about. You don't see that landmine until it's already exploding in your face.
Yeah, this is not, let's continue that analogy. This is not even like Minesweeper, where it tells you there's one mine in these surrounding 8 squares. We don't know how many are coming up. If we go this route, we don't know what's in front of us. And we don't know the impact that a seemingly harmless contribution or deposit into a checking account can have. And I see this, I personally haven't dealt with this, but I see this, I read about this a lot where, we have family members that want to help out and they leave gifts after they pass away to their grandchildren, nieces, nephews that, I know that there are some issues that we want to try to help, and we leave the money directly to them. And, the phrasing that I've seen with that is the good intentions of some people can have a catastrophic effect on that individual's overall picture, because We just left them $10,000, $5,000, whatever. And as a result, we've now lost SSI and Medicaid.
And now that individual would have to go through that whole process again, which could take months, if not years, to get back on the benefit. And
I have never met one person who said, I had so much fun applying for SSI. I hope I get to do it again someday.
Nope. Never have I.
No. So, with that this is what we have to do. We have to get that money into this account. There are certain assets an individual who is receiving Medicaid benefits can have. That's that $2,000 asset cap. They can have a vehicle, they can have a residence, and they can have a irrevocable final expense funeral plot take in place. And what it is important is that word irrevocable. It cannot be something that can be sold. It can't have a cash associated with it, or else it's an asset. And I see this. I have been, in my career as a financial planner, I've had nursing homes call me that somebody is in the process of going through the enrollment. I don't think enrollment is the best word, but they're going through the process of moving in, and they're spending down their assets, which Medicaid will require them to do. And they find that they have a life insurance policy with $2,500 of cash value in it, regardless of what the death benefit may be. That has to be spent down. That is another asset that has to be spent. So wherever the money comes from, the good intentions of other family members, an asset that we purchased, didn't think anything of, these are all hindrances. So this isn't just about nursing home care or long-term care. This is just about how the Medicaid program works. And it's based on dollars. It's what it's designed to do.
And in no way are we discouraging anybody to do those kind, good, intentional efforts. It's just, let's do them the right way.
Let's do them the right way. There are far more effective ways to do this that, I would say, if I'm saying we're starting our conversation with a cup of coffee, talking about family members, one thing we do say early on, if you do have parents, grandparents of the child that we're trying to plan for, brothers, aunts, and uncles, other family members that may want to help out, let them know what's going on. And if they do want to help, there are efficient and effective ways of doing so. And there are ways that are less efficient and effective. So I'm not saying tell everybody that they need to make these contributions, but if they want to help out, let them know that we're working on some things. We're starting the process to put plans in place that they can now be part of.
And this is really just a snippet of what you cover when you're sitting down with the family.
Absolutely. This is, if I look at this and say, here's the legal, financial, insurance, Social Security side of things, I give 2 disclaimers. I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice, but here's how trusts work. Here's how this portion works. Here's the financial. And we talk about the vast majority of this money is in retirement plans, 401s, 403s, for all these, if they're all different tax codes for salary deferral programs, as all these things are, IRAs and the tax implications and how money moves, the Secure Act and the changes that made in inherited assets, retirement assets. These are all parts. We need to consider all these things. So even the symbol I utilize when I talk about, again, the legal, financial, insurance, Social Security, I use the infinity symbol, and I have these 4 things in different sectors because it has to continue to work in unison with one another. If we have a gap, the rails break down at one point, what effect is that going to have on all of the other areas? So they have to work with one another. We have to understand how these areas, again, how all the different programs and benefits all work.
Now, I do have this question of just how do you handle if a family hears the phrase financial planning and thinks, and I'm just trying to get by week to week. I can't really look 2 weeks, a month, 10 years in the future. What do you say to families who are in that type of situation?
So one of the reasons that last year, and it was with the help of Jen Van Sciver with Special Olympics, who actually came up with the name Inclusive Futures. And that just was in passing. In a conversation we had, she was talking about inclusive design, which she will talk about a lot, and said inclusive futures. And it stood out to me because at that time, and I do realize I'm getting further away from the actual question that was posed.
No worries.
Poised, whichever.
It's about the journey to destination.
That's it. Was one of the harder things that I've experienced with, from the start of this plan 10 years ago was, Jeff, I don't know what my email address is. It ended in newyorklife.com. And I was at presentations and at events And I do multiple events per year. And what signage do I put up that, the purpose of being there is to initiate conversations. And if it says, financial planning in the background, or even worse, life insurance, then I see the look in people's eyes when they see it and they can't walk away fast enough from me and turn a corner. So they're out of it. It's not. So what I say with special needs planning is it's not about, we're not buying this or doing this or moving money from here to there. But it was an obstacle. It's an obstacle when I'm talking to schools who are, it's very difficult. They don't want to be put in a situation and position. That would be the whatever word I just used.
Yep.
They don't want to be in this position of showing any type of vendor favoritism. As a for-profit entity, which however I have to look at things, I am not a nonprofit. It makes it very difficult to say I'm a financial advisor and the school is advertising for me, but not Johnny's dad or Sally's mother, who's also in the same business. So that was one of the things that I realized, quite a few years ago, was I have to completely separate this special needs planning portion of my business from anything that has to do with financial planning. And the reason for it is I'm trying to help. And there's cliches all with that. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, and all these things. Is what Inclusive Futures allowed me to do was, here's an email address. Here is all these things. It's not at New York Life or John Hancock or any of these different companies that are completely associated with what is this person trying to sell me. I know, and we know, we have study after study that shows that families that have a child with special needs make on average $25,000 less per year than families that don't. We know families that have children with special needs have less money set aside for their own retirement, because how can I set money aside for tomorrow when I need all of this money today?
Nope.
And this goes back into, the other question that I alluded to, the first one was, what's the next step? What do you charge? And knowing these facts, to say I charge $100, $50, whatever it is per hour just to have a conversation, really goes against the whole principle of trying to help, knowing the difficulties that families are already in. It is, again, it starts with tell me what's on your mind. We'll get into what your specific situation is and what you can and can't do, which we talked about in a room of 50 or 5 or 50. What do you want to do and what you can do is so different. The first step is, again, that initial conversation of what's on your mind. The next step is, what do you envision the future for your family, both now and after your child reaches 18, 26, whatever that magical age? What do you see for their future? And that awful scenario, what do you see for that future after you're not here any longer? And why this goes back into that, why this is so hard to plan for, is that question that you asked of some families don't have any of the additional assets and resources to set aside for something for so far down the road when it's all needed today. And the best thing that I can do is, first and foremost, be that person that they can talk to and ask these questions to, and try to answer them the best that we can. And again, we're not getting into, well, here's what you do. You buy this and everything is taken care of. If we had that magic wand, we'd be waving it all day, every day. We don't. But if we can just sit back and say, based on your situation, these are some things that we can do based on what your income is and your assets are. And maybe, ideally, I had an article published in Parenting Special Needs magazine back in 2020. It was special needs planning during COVID. I talk a lot about if I can take $1 and be able to say it can be used for any one of these different things, depending on what that situation is in the future, that is the most efficient use that I can do. From a financial side, a split dollar arrangement is this dollar is doing multiple things depending on what the need in the future is going to be. And a lot of it comes back, to the tax code issue. ABLE accounts are part of the 529 code. What does that allow us to do? It gives us flexibility based on what the future situation may be. Maybe we do want to use this for qualified education expenses. Maybe it's never used for anything to do with education. We can move that money into the ABLE account. We have changes in the last year with what the 529 plan allows for. Now that money can be moved to a Roth IRA. Now, this is one of these, it blows my mind, dealing with the Department of Treasury when they came out with this new rule that allows 529s to go to Roth IRAs. Well, who's Roth IRA? Because who owns the 529? And by all definitions, it is the parent is the owner of that 529. FBO, another one, fun acronym for benefit of our child, that we want to set his money aside for education. Well, the way that this change happens is that money goes from the parent's 529 plan for the benefit of their child into that child's Roth IRA, which is a completely different social security number and how that works. But this is a long version of the story. What if I change the beneficiary of that 529 plan, which I can do whenever I want? I can make myself the beneficiary of my 529 plan and go take cooking lessons in Italy. And I say that I have no idea who the first financial advisor who said that was, but that is the most common change that we talk about with the 529 plan is cooking lessons in Italy. They cook in France too. I know that they have their cuisines. I can't even say it. So I can scramble eggs.
I think the important thing is there's so much that goes into this, that goes into thinking about tomorrow, thinking about 5, 10 years, 30 years down the road. And we've said it numerous times, it's overwhelming, but you have a wealth of knowledge and a clear passion for this to help families set up for a successful future. Uh, I guess the big question is how do they get in touch with you?
Well, I have a Facebook page, which I will tell you this the Facebook page, I have a Facebook page and a web page. And I had a good friend of mine design the web page. I had no idea what maintaining a web page was actually like. It's for me, it's like looking at the matrix with all the green symbols on it. I don't know how to do really anything on a web page. It was, more in theory, it sounded great. The Facebook page. I have a Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/, I believe is how it works, and inclusive future. And it'll take you right to my Facebook page. I have all of my contact information on there, email address, phone number. It's very easy just to text or call and set up a time. Again, what is our first step? The first step is after we have that initial telephone conversation or in-person conversation at that presentation is let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's just talk about what you have going on. So going back to that analogy of that, we started that 20,000 feet up in the air and the overwhelmingness. And here I am on the ground with the orange pylons and the earmuffs saying, let's come to me, come down. You're on the right path. Let's go have a talk. Let's have this chat about your situation. And just, again, knowing that here's somebody that you can talk to that understands these things. And more importantly, if there are things I don't know, I do know who I can go to and ask these questions.
And you're quite connected in the disability community and all the resources out there. Jeff, it's an absolute pleasure seeing you again and chatting with you. I hope our listeners do reach out because it is a crucial service that is going to only create success going forward. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, I think I will, with that, thank you for everybody's time, your time here today. Again, I will just pass it, reiterate that message of, this is what I try to be. It's simply a resource. And I say that, I say overwhelming a lot. I say resource a lot because that's really how I view what it is that I do. I'm a resource. I am somebody that can answer the questions that you have and questions you don't have. And the questions you have that I don't have answers for, I will find you the answers because I know how I can Google these things, but more importantly, I know who I can ask to help you out. And that's all I'm trying to do. That's all I'm here to do is just to help.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
As you can clearly see, Jeff is a absolute wealth of knowledge with an immense amount of passion for the work that he does. If you are a person caring for an individual with a disability, please do not hesitate to reach out to Jeff. He is more than willing to work with anybody to ensure that they are having a truly inclusive future. With that, that is going to wrap up part 1 of this season, as we will be going on a hiatus for the next couple months. But do join us next week as we drop a sneak peek of what's to come in part 2 of season 2 of Flattening the Curve. Thank you all and have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. Once again, this has been John Couchy with Flattening the Curve. a podcast brought to you by disability advocates. For more information on our organization, engage with us on social media and visit our website at dakc.us. Like and subscribe, hit that notification bell to be alerted when our next episode drops. And remember, you can't have inclusion without accessibility. So let's build a more inclusive world one story at a time.